Hi, everyone. Dr. Elizabeth Bonet here. Dr. Liz, welcome to the Hypnotize Me podcast. Before we jump in, please note that the podcast is not mental health treatment, nor should it replace mental health treatment. If you need psychotherapy or hypnotherapy, please seek treatment from a trained professional. I do hypnosis all over the world, so please feel free to contact me through my website, drlizhypnosis.com, DRLIZ hypnosis.com. Hi, everyone. Dr. Liz here. Today, I'm interviewing Nicole Burgess. She is a leadership coach to introverted, ambitious, and highly sensitive professional women. She's also the host of the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and it has one of my favorite logos of all time. Love her logo. It's like this gigantic, beautiful mandala. Over the last 16 years, she's coached, guided, and collaborated with over 1,000 women, and she really is an expert on the highly sensitive person. Nicole's been on the podcast before. That time, I think she was talking more about parenting questions. And I just really love her energy. Now, just so you know, we lost audio about halfway through. So there's a little blip there. I'll put a little fairy wand sound as we come back. So this is not just a theoretical conversation. She also peppers in lots of practical suggestions for you along the way about what to do in certain situations if you are HSP. And if you're really unsure, you can take the quiz over at hsperson.com. All right, let's jump in. Hi, Nicole. Welcome back to the Hypnotize Me podcast.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. And for the listeners, Nicole has a new puppy, Tango, who is super cute. If you go over to her social media sites and see him, and you may hear him in the background because he is quite rambunctious. There he is.
Now, yeah. All right, let me do this. Let me pause for a second. Let me go let him out because I know he's had so much water, and then I will be back.
No problem.
Okay.
Back?
Yes.
All right. Great. So, Nicole, you're a specialist in highly sensitive people.
Correct.
A highly sensitive person, particularly women.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find a lot more women are highly sensitive than men?
You know, I can't even recall what Dr. Elaine Aron, she's the one who coined that term back in the early 1990s. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe there's more men than women. I can't think of the statistic off the top of my head. Highly sensitives only make up about 20 to 25% of the population. So it's not huge.
That's a good percentage.
Yeah, but it's
actually, that's like a quarter of the people.
It is, and to me, I guess in my mind, I'm thinking more like if it was 50 or 60, be like, oh, all right, we got half and half, but that's more like with introverts and extroverts. Mm-hmm. But for us, it's like, nope, it's just a smaller portion. And our world just really isn't designed too much for highly sensitives, and empaths are something a little different, even though you can be an HSP and an empath. But Dr. Aron, go ahead.
What's the difference between an HSP and an empath?
HSP is more like your deep thinking, deep feeling. I mean, it's literally where neurologically our brain is wired very differently. And I was reading some things about an empath is much more where they're sensing things, feeling things. They may feel energy differently. It can be an HSP and an empath. Mm-hmm. So it's just recognizing, again, there's not a lot of scientific studies done trying to discern between the two. Yeah. And I think there's where some confusion, and then sometimes there's some division with people. They're like, no, but I'm this and I'm that. And it's like, well, okay, you can be both.
Interesting. Well, I was riding along in the car with my two girls last weekend, and my 15-year-old was recently diagnosed with autism level 1, which I like to call the artist formerly known as Asperger's. And my older daughter, who's 20, asked me, Mom, do you think you're autistic? And I was like, no, I don't meet criteria. I'm pretty sure. She's like, yeah, but you have autistic traits. And I was like, I know I'm a highly sensitive person, HSP. And then she went on this whole 20-year-old college student rant
Mm-hmm.
about HSP actually being some of the criteria for autism,
Right.
actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I'm going to interview Nicole Burgess on my podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like, you have to ask her about that because you're talking about divisive. And she said it gets sort of divisive in the autism community around the HSP.
Yes.
So I wanted your thoughts around that.
So I still think they're two different traits. Again, based upon what I'm seeing, and I hear your daughter, there's certain social media groups that I have other colleagues that are in it. And so, the whole neurodiversity, where some people, maybe it's attention deficit, maybe it's the autistic spectrum, maybe it's highly sensitive. And there's that umbrella. But for me and how I look at that for autism, there's still the social aspect of it. They often have more like digestive issues and things like that don't meet really what Dr. Aaron has talked about. And it doesn't mean they can't be highly sensitive as well, but there's differences in, I'll call it the way the brain is wired.
That makes sense to me because I sort of compare it to like, okay, you can feel sad and have a down week or two. That doesn't mean you meet full criteria for clinical depression.
Correct.
Right. So it's like, all right, I know I have sensory stuff, lights and sound, and I had that my whole life and clothes and that type of thing. But I clearly don't meet full criteria for autism.
Right.
Like, I'm actually very social.
Yeah.
Like, even though I'm an introvert,
right.
I relate socially extremely well.
Yeah. So, and I think that, again, Dr. Aaron talks about, oftentimes people really gravitate because it's a sensory processing trait. And she's like, people will say something about the lights or the clothes. And she's like, that's a piece of it. But the biggest distinction for highly sensitive really is the depth of processing and the depth of feeling. That's really that distinguishing factor.
So they tend to feel deeper.
Yes.
To say.
Yep. And they have it in like with the mirror neurons and how they light up a lot more. So there's a lot more brain studies that have been done with HSPs now. And so they're starting to find out more and more with what is making it different in the brain, which is really cool.
Yeah, fascinating. And when you say deeper processing, what do you mean by that?
So there's this image I've seen on Facebook before. If you think of like, oh, I'm thinking of, I don't know, I'm going to go fishing. So you go to A to B type of thing. But our brain's like, oh, I remember when I went fishing over here and then I did this and so was with me. And it's like this convoluted trail to get to that event because you are remembering different things. You're thinking ahead of like, what are some of the things that I may need? Who may else be involved? I want to make sure I don't hurt anybody else's feelings. And like, you're taking in almost like the whole world before you get to that fishing trip type of thing.
Okay. Versus someone who just grabs their pole and like, yeah, we're going fishing. Doesn't even worry about it.
Yep.
Great.
So one part of her does, right. Her acronym, Dr. Elaine Aaron uses is like, the depth of processing is how the person's brain sorts, categorizes, and makes sense of everything. We're very deep thinkers. So we're connecting all these different patterns together, which makes us really good problem solvers.
Great. But then what are some of the problems that HSPs run into?
Oh, goodness. So we're known for that tendency for perfectionism because when we do something, we want to do it right. And we often do that first time, but we can get stuck in stopping ourselves from taking a step forward and just letting it kind of unfold or be what it is. So it's being very mindful, like just take a step and see what happens. But we like to contemplate things. We like to think things over because we want to do it once and kind of be done with it. That's one thing. We can do a lot of ruminating, getting stuck in our emotions versus feeling them and moving through them. And because we're so in tuned often with other people and the environment, if we see, let's say we have a coworker that isn't doing, so well, or they're behind on their work, sometimes, HSPs will step in and start doing those things for the person, which then again leads to burnout because you're not respecting your own boundaries, or we take on other people's emotions when again, it's not ours. So it's recognizing there's kind of where you start and stop and where the other person starts and stops, and being able to do that. And if you're overstimulated, which is her O of the does, making sure you have tons of time. There's typically around 2 hours per day, night, that you are off like all your screens, you actually have some quiet time. And I know oftentimes people are like, that's a lot of downtime. It's like, yep, because your nervous system has been tuned in all flippin' day.
Yeah.
And if you're in an office space or you're with your kiddos, if you're seeing clients, you're running around, whatever it may be, having just some downtime, unplugged, being in nature is huge in relaxing that nervous system and kind of coming back to self again.
Great. Great. That's about when I have the time. I don't have the time every day, but
Right.
I think about like I take an hour to 2 hours in the morning.
Yep. That's called
Where
our slow startup. Mm-hmm.
yes, where I'm processing, I'm planning, I'm journaling,
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening to podcasts sometimes and taking notes on them,
Mm-hmm.
like I mean, it really is an active process for me, but is
Yes.
absolutely like no screens
Yes.
typically and very, it's an alone process, I call it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
when I married the newer husband, the newish husband, I call him now, it was a process when he moved in
Mm-hmm.
of telling him like, no, you cannot turn the TV on first thing in the morning.
Yep.
Or you can, but you've got to use headphones. But I
Yes.
don't even like the screen flashing in the
Yep.
other room.
Yep.
So eventually he stopped that
Yeah.
because I was like, I'm sorry, I just can't tolerate it. Like, no. I take that time in the morning, but I
Yeah.
typically, you're saying it's really recommended in the evening?
It's both. So for
Both.
most highly sensitives, and I think really again, a lot of my clients too are also introverted as well. I know I need that slow startup too. And so do
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my clients to feel really grounded and they come through the day feeling more calm. But it is also at night, making sure you've got plenty of downtime. If you can't do 2 hours, then even an hour would be helpful, right? It's like
Yeah.
turning those lights down low, reading versus watching something or journaling, processing your day so that it's not mulling around in your sleep. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And saying here's what I'm grateful for. Here's what went well today. So you also just celebrate you.
Yeah.
There's so many ways to help you unwind at night and setting limits with family members if need be. Like, hey, this is, this next 20 minutes, half hour, whatever is my time and my quiet time. And everybody can
Mm-hmm.
have quiet time as well. And it just teaches everybody. It's like you can all learn to self-soothe and self-regulate by having that quiet time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do some planning at night too and
Mm-hmm.
do my gratefulness list and what I
Mm-hmm.
learned that day and
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
too. It's not as a much of a lone process because my husband will often sit next to me when I do
Mm-hmm.
that, watching TV or something. But yeah, it's interesting. I do that at night. I think I have way more ability and time to do that now that my kids are much older.
Older. Yeah.
When they were little, it was just impossible. It really
Yeah.
was.
I,
And so I think as I learned more about HSP, it's like, oh, that's also why I was so burned out when they were
yes.
little.
Yes. One of the ladies I interviewed, this has been a couple years ago now on my podcast, she talked about that. Like she knew she was more sensitive. And I don't know whether she knew the highly sensitive term or not at that point in time. I don't remember. But she remembers, she's like, yeah, I actually hired somebody to help me out with my little girl because she's like, I just couldn't do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I bet you got some backlash on that from some people, right? And she's like, oh yeah, but it was for my own well-being and it worked.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Wow.
kudos to you. Because again, it's like, well, you're the woman, you're supposed to do it all. And it's like, no, it's
Yeah.
like, not when you're highly sensitive, having some extra help, having time away from those folks, hiring somebody, if you're able to afford that, do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally agree with that. Yes. Yeah. So do you find that HSPs are in general, more introverts than extroverts
There's
or
a
they're
much bigger percentage. And if I remember the statistic, I may get it wrong, but I think it's like 60% are introverts and then the
okay.
40% are extroverts, or maybe it's 70-30. I'm going to blank on that now. But yes, a lot more introverted. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, thinking about all that time alone and
Mhm.
processing and needing that. And it's like, I actually even wonder, like, how do extrovert HSPs do that?
So it's fascinating, right? So in some of my coaching business, I've had some extroverted folks and they didn't realize they were HSPs, but they were finding like they really were getting more into midlife and really truly recognizing like, man, I actually need more downtime, but I like being with people. And I'm like, yeah, it's not about not being with people or being with people. You get, you may bounce your ideas off there. You get energized by that. and you are taking in so much, which again is at the S part of the does, the sensitivity to subtleties.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking in everything, the lights, the sounds, people's nuances, all that stuff is coming in, and your nervous system's like, whoo, I need a little break. I need more space in my calendar. I need to do these things. It doesn't make you introverted. It makes you highly sensitive. And when they look through some of those, questions about what it means to be highly sensitive, they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
is it. But it's like, it's so many years later that they're figuring it out. And then they look back in their history and they're recognizing, like, oh, I understand why I was feeling edgy or grumpy because there wasn't enough boundaries or people weren't there for my emotional needs. And I stuffed that down. And so I've been
Mm-hmm.
making myself wrong for decades.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So once they realize that, then they can it sounds like learn how to balance their schedule more.
Yes. So it's
Okay.
the schedule, it's their boundaries, it's I call it take up space, meaning,
Uh-huh.
assert yourself more. And then
Mm.
they honor who they are. They're honoring what's coming up within them. They're honoring, like, does this yes really light me up? Does it align with my values? Does it not?
Does this light you up? Does this align with your values?
Yeah. And so the women will really kind of think about, if it's not aligning with my values or, aligning with my temperament, then they start to learn to say no or thank you for the invite, but not at this time. And they really start to
Mm.
honor themselves because they're more in touch with who they are. It's like that we talk about, that capital S for self, the higher self. They
Mm-hmm.
really tap into that. And then I call it's like you leave yourself more as an open channel then for whatever divine guidance may want to pop in, whatever information is supposed to come forward, you have the space to hear it then when you're in that alignment.
Oh, fantastic. I love that like deeper sense of it
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes I think people really just get caught in the practical. Or I
Yeah.
heard someone recently say, this is one of my friends, she said, oh, I have such a hard time asserting myself and it felt so rude to say no. But then it was like she doesn't leave space for the other stuff to come in when she does say no or to take care of herself.
Yes. And it's so fascinating. Women have been so conditioned to be the caretakers, to not have like healthy boundaries, it's rude if you say no. I hear that so often from my clinical and my coaching clients about
Mm-hmm.
that fear of saying no to others. I don't want to hurt their feelings. And HSPs, like, we are notorious for like so not wanting to hurt other people's feelings. I'm like, but you
Yeah.
rob them of using their own mind, of feeling their own feelings when you do say no. It's like you stay on your side of the fence, your side of the
Mm-hmm.
sidewalk, your side of the street, whatever phrase you want to use, and do you. That becomes the
Yeah.
relationship.
Well, do you have a good tip of like how to start, even in small ways, to say no when someone really wants to say no? Let's say they're very clear on like, I want to say no, but I'm scared of hurting someone's feelings, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
scared of making them angry, or it feels rude.
Yep. I'll give a couple different examples. Let's say your kids got, I don't know, the PTA meetings, they've got an upcoming event of something or other, and you've been asked to participate, volunteer for it. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so
Uh-huh.
exhausted and I'm cranky and I cannot do this. There's no way. Hey, as much as I would love to do that this time around, unfortunately, I am unable to do that due to my schedule, due to my energy level. But please keep me in mind for the next time. Or if there's a smaller task that maybe I could do at home that would help participate with this, I would be open to that.
Oh, fantastic. That's a good one.
Yeah.
What about at a situation like work?
Yeah. So let's see. Let's say you're a manager, and
Mm-hmm.
this is when I get, again, HSPs love to take on more stuff and not say no. If you are like a manager, then you've also got a manager and they're like, oh my gosh, you do such great work, Elizabeth. We want to put you on this other project while you're working on this other thing over here. And you're like, oh my gosh, I've got like 20 things that are on my to-do list. Then go back to that supervisor and you can say, hey, I love that you want me on this next project. And I'm wondering, could you help me then prioritize what you want me to do first? Because here's what I have lined up so far.
Fantastic. Okay. And then what about, I'm thinking about somebody trying to do that and getting super anxious. about doing that? Any tips for them to like help them calm down and really, practice doing that?
One way to practice, honestly, I do so much. I like visualize this stuff by myself first and foremost. I mean, I can feel like the butterflies will come up on my stomach, or like my throat starts to get tight, right? That's our throat chakra where our truth is. And it's visualizing, okay, I'm having this conversation with this person or persons or friends or family or whatever. And just realizing like, this is coming from a heart space. This is coming from love for myself, love for them. I'm not doing it out of vindictiveness. I'm not trying to be mean. But it's like, if I don't take care of me, then I can't be there for others. And so first kind of just visualize like, I'm very calm, I'm well, everybody is safe. And then if you can practice with somebody that you know is easier for you to practice with, you can do a little bit of role playing. And then the more you keep practicing or even doing small steps like this, your confidence level really does get better. Because again, we're taking action against our ego who's saying, oh my gosh, you're going to hurt their feelings and they're going to like not like you. You're going to lose your job. It'll go to extremes. That's what the ego and fear will do. Right. But it's like, I can feel nervous and assert myself. It's not an either or. That nervousness. The nervousness in the moment won't kill me or anybody else. I just feel it in my body. So I can take a couple of deep breaths or
Yeah, I see it as like retraining the brain too. Like the more that you do that, the more you practice that, the easier it becomes.
Yes.
And it reminds me when I was in like my mid-20s, I had graduated grad school. I had my PhD and I decided to leave the field of psychology. So I worked in various jobs, some in tech, but this one position I had for a couple of months, maybe even like 6 months, was working as an assistant for a multimillionaire. And before a business meeting, he would sit me in the conference room and he would practice what he was going to say. This was an extremely successful guy already, but he wanted a person there, an audience there, so that he could practice what he was going to say in the like next meeting coming up. So it reminds me of that, like practice ahead of time, really do it out loud even, because it comes out differently when we do it in our heads versus out loud.
Yes.
Yeah. I always think like in our heads, everybody reacts perfectly, right?
Right. Everyone's silent or they're all looking at you or whatever needs to happen. Yeah. It so doesn't happen that way, but yes.
It doesn't, right? But yeah, in our heads, it's like our boss just says, that's a great idea. Right? Or our kids are always perfect in our heads. Not my kids in my head, but yeah.
Oh, the fantasy life.
Yes, exactly. Well, I really like also how you spoke about the throat chakra and how to tune into that and really free it up is what the vision, the like picture that came to me is like this throat chakra just sort of expanding, like light expanding out of the throat. That's what the image is that came to me.
Yes. And it's fascinating, right? Over the years, I remember being in my 20s, 30s, where again, my throat, I could feel it. Like even now, right? There's a small tension. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm speaking up about this. And there's a nervousness about it. But nobody's going to die from this conversation. I'm not going to die. Nobody's being harmed. If they don't like it, they'll just turn it off. It's easy as that.
Yes.
But, right. When we speak that truth, or we may go against somebody else's belief system, it's not making me right and them wrong. It's like we have a difference of opinion. We have a different belief system. I'm open to hearing yours. Hopefully you're open to hearing mine, and we can still agree to disagree.
Absolutely. Yes. I love the delaying technique you use too. Hit me up for the next project, right? For the PTA or, I always say, what was it like? Oh, maybe I'll have some of that later if it's a food pusher, like, oh, have this. I just made it, whatever. And oh, maybe I'll have some later. Can I save it for later? Like that type of thing where it's a soft no. That's what I call it. Like a soft no versus like a hard no, like no and go away or no. And
if you feel drawn to say no, because that's you taking up space, then say it directly. And that's okay too. No, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. That's a really good point. Like I tend to do the soft no, but yes, if someone has a hard no, you got to say the hard no. Yep. Agreed. So let me review the does, DOES. So we have the D.
D is the depth of processing.
Mm-hmm.
O is overstimulated. I mean, when life's coming at you all over the place, right? It's like, shoo, there's so much going on in your nervous system and what you're taking in. And so it's making sure you can decompress. The E is the emotional responsiveness. And what that means is HSPs have like more, they feel the positives more strongly and the negative events more strongly. So I laugh. There's times where, you walk outside and you see a butterfly. I can, I've got butterfly bushes. And I mean, I could be literally moved to tears. The sunset, sunrise could move you to tears. A painting could move you to tears, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
normal because there's just different things in the brain that are getting all lit up. And you're just like, there's such beauty in that thing that you're witnessing. And the other part, that the negative events, right? If you're watching violent movies, that can really move you to feeling, hurt and worried and things like that. And so that's why oftentimes HSPs avoid a lot of the violent movies or violent scenes and things. And then,
Ah.
yeah. And then the S is for sensitivity to subtleties. Again, you notice everything. You're beautifully conscientious, and
Mm-hmm.
recognizing kind of what may be going on for other people in the room or the vicinity you are, just doesn't mean you need to take it all on.
Yeah. All right. So it's about building some of those boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
like internally.
Yep.
But also externally, like setting boundaries with people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that internally I find is often difficult for people. Like
Mm-hmm.
how do you shut off a room that you're walking into and say you have to be there for a networking event or work or something like that?
When I've done those in the past, I walk in with the mindset like I have an intention. My intention is to meet maybe two people. So that's first and
Mm-hmm.
foremost. That speaks more to my introversion than anything else. It's like, here's my goal. I'm going to meet two people. Then the next thing I do is like, oh my gosh, I can't wait just to look around and observe. So again, I've got a whole different intention being set up. I get to observe what's going on. I get to observe the people. And that's my slow warm up, right? When I walk into
Uh-huh.
a room and I see people, maybe they're laughing or maybe somebody's hiding in the corner, another introverted folk, type of thing, whatever it may be. But it's like, I'm just going to be the observer right now. I don't need to do anything else but observe, giving yourself
Great.
permission to just, slowly warm up.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you have given us the high level and then really good practical tips. Thank you so
You're
much.
very welcome.
Yeah, we're coming to the end of our time. So please tell people how to find you.
Yeah. So my current podcast is a soul-filled sisterhood. So we talk all about kind of HSP stuff and business and just living in like the different parts of life are covered on the podcast, and they can go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com. And then there is a link on there that says to my podcast, and they can find all the episodes and the upcoming ones and all that good stuff.
So it's Nicole Burgess, BURGESS coaching.com.
Right.
And that will be in the show notes for everyone. And then they can get connected with how to work with you as well as check out your podcast.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here. I learned a lot today and I found the conversation really supportive.
I loved being on. Thank you for having me today.
I hope you truly enjoyed today's episode. Remember that you can get free hypnosis downloads over at my website, drlizhypnosis.com, DRLIZ hypnosis.com. I work all over the world doing hypnosis. So if you're interested in working with me, please schedule a free consultation over at my website, and we'll see what your goals are and if I can be of service to you in helping you reach them. Finally, if you liked today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast or tell a friend. That way, more and more people learn about the power of hypnosis. All right, everyone, have a wonderful week. Peace.